You wanted the best, but you're shit out of luck. Welcome to the KissFAQ podcast. We're here to waste some of your time and hopefully entertain you for a little bit. So thank you for letting us into your head. Hope we don't do any damage. Welcome to episode 6 of the KissFAQ podcast. Thank you for joining us and spending some time with us. I'd like to welcome back Jay and Lonnie. And we've got a new guy this week, so I'd like to introduce Ken. Or let Ken introduce himself. So Ken, why don't you give an introduction to yourself?
All right, my name is Ken. You may know me as 69th Blizzard on the forum. I don't post a whole lot, but I'm out there and I'm usually reading almost every day out there. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I became a fan in 1977. I think about a year or two before that, I had a chance to become a fan when a friend across the street showed me the Kiss's first album, which I saw. I thought, well, what are clowns playing music for, you know? I thought that was strange. But later on in 77, I had another friend approach me with, he started to play an album for me, and it started off mellow with acoustic, and all of a sudden it started blaring in. And I was like, whoa. I jumped back and said, what is this? And it turned out to be Rock and Roll Over. I Want You. So ever since then, I've been a fan. My first Kiss album was Alive 2. My favorite is Rock and Roll Over. That was the first one that it kind of got me into it, and it holds up sonically, and the songs and everything else on it is great. My favorite member of the band was usually Gene Simmons. Back in the day, we've dressed up as Kiss, I was always Gene. So I kind of liked his philosophy of the at least no drugs and no drinking kind of thing. So, and that's it. And I'm glad to be here.
Well, that's really cool. Thanks a lot for joining us. It's great to get more and more people on the FAQ participating on these calls, so that we can kind of show the KISS Army who we are, rather than just being anonymous people on a message board. And if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, that's awesome. So am I, obviously. So, kind of amazing that someone just down the road ends up on a call. So let's get into today's topic, and it's kind of a timely topic for what's going on, on the calendar right now. Well, or some of it will be. But today's topic is, what do you think are the top 5 moments in KISStory? And these are, kind of your personal top 5, rather than, I guess, trying to define what the band's top 5 are, because most of those are going to be pretty straightforward-ish. So, I think I'm going to let someone else take the lead today, rather than me monologuing any longer. So, Lonnie, why don't you kick it off with one of yours?
All right. For me, and I thought about this for a little bit, but the top 5 moments in KISStory, for me, when KISS was their biggest, their absolute biggest, is June 28th, 1996. Tiger Stadium. You won the best, you got the best, the hottest band in the world, KISS. And like Gene says in The Second Coming, that night they were. And you can watch that show, and I know there's flaws in that show. They weren't perfect that night. Even the first song, there's a big flaw in Deuce with Peter's drumming. But for what it is, that show, Tiger Stadium, sold out, 45 minutes. That, to me, is the biggest single moment for the band ever. And I don't care what they do after that. They will never be as big as they were that night.
And they were bigger that night than they had been in 1977. Agreed. If you listen to the most recent episode of 3 Sides, and Jeff's talking a little bit about this show, they kind of just come on stage, here's KISS, and all of a sudden it is Time Warp on steroids back to 1977, and what those people who were fans back then, obviously I could be revisionist because I wasn't a fan in 77, what they thought that show was. For you guys, I mean, Ken, you got into the band and with Alive 2 in that era. How do you see Tiger Stadium?
see that as very huge. I mean, the first time I saw Kiss was the '79 Dynasty Tour, and so that was my only chance to see the original lineup. So when the reunion thing happened, and with they appearing on the Grammy Awards, and then the big conference on the aircraft carrier out there, that reunion thing was big because I wanted to see the original lineup again, because that was always, the standard for me. And I don't know, the Tiger Stadium, I kind of expected more. I thought there would be a little bit more flash there, but and I think they had the weenie roast just before that, the warm up. So I remember seeing a little bit of that. But yeah, that was huge, and that tour they were selling out everywhere, and me getting tickets to that tour. I was way back, and I got there early to pick up the tickets, so it didn't make sense. But yeah, I agree with Lonnie, because that was one of the 5 on my list. The reunion tour was huge.
Jay.
And even leading up to that, they're on the cover of every magazine out there. I mean, not only just the 4 covers on Spin magazine, but Hit Parader, Metal Edge, Forbes magazine. They're on the cover of everything going. They were the biggest band. And I remember I went to the St. Louis show, which was the 3rd show of the tour, and it sold out like in 30 minutes. And my brother and I were in the rafters on Ace's side of the stage. And yeah, we were up top, but we didn't have great seats, but we just felt so lucky just to be there, because so many of our friends and people that we knew weren't going because it sold out immediately. And I just think they will never be as big as they were for those, especially the early stages of the reunion tour. They really were the biggest band and the hottest band in the world. And to me, that Tiger Stadium is the culmination of everything leading up to that, after MTV Unplugged, and it just, bam, there they are. And could have they done more? Like, yeah, they could have done more than just saying, you want the best, you got the best, and here they are finally. I really thought there would be some kind of like video montage leading up to that point before they jumped on stage that night, or just something to present the band even bigger than what they were. But that Tiger Stadium show, and that's why, flaws and all, it's on Kissology 3, because that night was just, that moment was just the biggest moment of their career.
Jay, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, actually, that was on my list as well. I actually, originally, one of my top moments was just the reunion in general, because there were so many great moments involving the reunion, from the Grammys surprise appearance, which, I saw coming because I'd heard some rumblings about it, but wasn't 100% sure. That right there was an amazing moment. I think, the USS Intrepid press conference was a fantastic moment, especially having Conan O'Brien, MC the event. But yeah, Tiger Stadium, I was one of the fortunate lucky souls that got to go to Tiger Stadium. I lived in Indiana at the time, and my wife at the time and my best friend, who was also a raging Kiss fanatic, the 3 of us made the pilgrimage up to Detroit. We got tickets for a reasonable price. I think I got mine for $125 a pop, which, considering how quickly it sold out, we were grateful for that. I will say, yes, they were a little low on pyrotechnics and whatnot, but if you were there, you weren't even paying attention to that. There was so much electricity in that venue that I can't even put it into words. By far, probably the most memorable concert I've ever been to in my life, especially Kiss show. I had no idea how special it was going to be, other than being, the first date of the reunion tour. But since they'd already done the weenie roast before, I kind of felt like maybe it would be anticlimactic, but not at all. I was actually standing outside one of the portalette toilets, waiting for my turn to go to the bathroom. And there was a line of a ton of people, and it was in between it was before Kiss went on, and the lights went down just as I was getting ready to go in, and I had to make a split-second decision, and I was like, screw this, I'm going back to my seat. So, but I will tell you, man, it was electric, especially when the lights dropped down. You hear that all-familiar that monotone drone that always precedes the big intro. And then I remember looking up and seeing helicopters, swarming overhead, which to me, I'd never experienced a helicopter at a venue. That alone was just bizarre. But I was surrounded by people. I was on the floor, and I was just maybe a little closer to Gene's side of the stage. But I remember the guy next to me was having such a freak out over the whole thing. He was crying uncontrollably. And, I don't know what he was shouting because it was too loud. But the dude completely passed out and fell backwards off his chair, and this couple behind him were trying to push him back up. And they ended up going and getting, I don't know, medics or something. Some guys ended up taking him out, and I never saw him again. But it was pretty intense, man. And, definitely, I think Tiger Stadium certainly qualifies for one of the all-time great moments. Probably not one of the band's most fierce and tight performances. I'm sure they were as nervous as the fans were about the first show of the tour, but it was amazing, man.
Well, talk about taking the tiger by the balls to have your first show of the tour in Detroit, in the heartland, the homeland of the band.
Yeah.
And that's just, how many of you, I had this as my number one of my top 5 moments because I just don't see anything else coming close. Did everyone else have this on their list of their top 5?
Yeah, I had it on mine. I didn't rank them because it was just so hard to rank all these little milestones that I kind of have with the band. So I didn't bother ranking it, but I would certainly say that would be probably number 1 or 2 for me.
Yeah, it's definitely number 1 for me, no doubt.
I had 3, but I wasn't putting it in any particular order. So.
And I still kick myself. I missed that whole tour. I was living in England at the time and going to university in Canterbury down south. And
the admin on the FAQ didn't see a show on the reunion tour. That is breaking news.
Yeah, it was horrible for me to travel, and I can't remember if I drunk all my money in the student union or I'd blown it all on postage tape trading. But I sure did build up a lot of audio bootlegs during that tour. So
right on.
All right, so let's move on to number 2, and I'm going to pick this one just so I get it in there before someone else grabs one of mine. And my number 5 pick is Dick Clark's In Concert 1974, the band's first major TV appearance in the United States. And that whole appearance is absolutely amazing to me, even looking back on it now. And just before I talk about it, I do want to give a shout out to Ross Radley. If you're on Facebook, go and check out his Magic the Kiss Chronicles 1973 to 83 group. He posted some absolutely killer photos from that today, which just makes this pick so topical. So we'll post that in one of the links for this because it's a really cool project that Ross is working on. It's going to be hopefully a book project, a day-by-day accounting of the band's first 10 years that he hopes to be the definitive history for that period. So it's really cool, and he's getting a whole bunch of very neat photos up on the Facebook group. So check it out, join it, like it, and support him because he's a good guy. But getting back to this is, it's only 3 songs are broadcast on that. It's a little bit uncomfortable because they're green, but it's just so important to KISStory for me that, seeing, Nothing to Lose, Firehouse, and Black Diamond perform live just goes beyond description. And according, of course, to the guys in Kiss Alive Forever, they also did Deuce, but those tapes have apparently been lost. So that's my pick. Is that on anyone else's list?
It's not on my list, but yeah, their first major television appearance playing those 3 classic songs live. As far as just put yourself in that moment, put yourself in the band's shoes at that moment. That, wow, here we are on Dick Clark's show playing to a national audience. In your young kids in your 20s, you probably think, wow, we've I think, this is it. We're making it. But I didn't have it on my top moments, but I can see, Julian, why you would.
Yeah, and just to think of how they got that. I mean, that's insane for a band who wasn't selling product. The album had been out 5-6 weeks at that point. So it's either Neil Bogart or Bill, pulling some pretty major strings. That's just an absolute coup for a band. I mean, that would be like some no-name band down at your local pub with some original songs getting on, do we have any music shows left on TV nowadays?
I think those days are long
gone.
I guess the Tonight Show is about the only thing you have left, and maybe there's a musical act, but that's about it.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's just insane how they pulled that one off. Real cool.
Yeah, I mean, that was not on my list, but, of course, I was thinking not only personally, but more so just what I thought maybe were Kiss's top 5 moments as a band. I've side distanced myself a little bit from some of the things that I chose, but if I had to go personal picks, I would definitely put In Concert up there for sure. I have a total fascination with that footage. I'd love to find out if that footage is even something that could be licensed, because I'd love to see it in, at least direct off the master. I'd love to see a better quality copy of that footage, because I think it's so fascinating to watch, just to see them in such an early stage of their development, But, yeah, it's a great moment for sure. Good pick.
It wasn't on my list, but I know it's a big moment. At least I'm able to see it on the Kissology series and go back and kind of imagine what it was like, being there the day it did air on TV. And I wasn't picking moments I thought were the band's most huge moments, but maybe more, big for me that I could relate to, or what I experienced, or what really, hit me at the time it happened. So.
See, I didn't have a choice. Becoming a fan in '85, I got to go back into the archives to find my top 5 because Asylum just is not going to do it. As much of an underrated album as I say it is. All right, let's move on. Ken, how about a pick from you?
I'm going to pick the Tom Snyder show, 1979, Halloween. That was the first real experience I saw Kiss actually, speaking, right? Never heard them. Usually Paul would speak on stage, but that was different than what he does in person or in an interview. But that was the real first interview I saw, and I would call it a major interview because it lasted a while. And Tom Snyder was pretty huge back then on the late night circuit on TV. And I remember it was Halloween, and I saw the original showing when it first aired, and we just came back from we didn't trick or treat. I was a little old for that at that time, but we were out at a skating rink, and we were dressed up as Kiss, and I was Gene Simmons. So I came back. I knew it was going to be on that night, and I watched it when it appeared, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And I didn't know Ace was drunk at the time. I just thought he was, a comic, So I thought that was huge. It was huge for me, and I love to go back to and watch that over and over.
I gotta ask, what was your impression of Ace's laugh? If you're hearing them for the first time, here they are, not live, but on slightly delayed, hearing that freaking laugh for the first time.
Oh, it was crazy. It was hilarious. It's almost shocking in a way the first time you hear it, just the way he cackles. It was hilarious. And the thing with Gene Simmons on that, he already looks mean or mad with the makeup, right? But then he was kind of getting ticked off there.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why is he so, he's just in character, right?
Yeah, I have that as my number 2 on my list. Just, Ace and Peter. That is the one moment, pretty much in all of KISStory, that they steal the show from Gene and Paul.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's true.
I think everyone can visualize Gene and Paul's sideways glances, look of annoyance, look of fear. I mean, it's glorious in that sense.
Yeah,
But
especially the Gene Simmons "Hi Mom" tension breakers thrown in for good measure, just because he didn't know what else to say. That was awesome.
but it's a toy gun. A toy, yeah, okay, nice try.
Right.
Total fail.
No
You know,
drugs. No drugs.
I just love the look of Peter on that whole show, where Ace is cackling away, talking on space bears and plumbing. Peter looks ready to keel over to me.
Peter looks like he's just in a daze the whole time. Like Peter probably has no recollection of that whatsoever because he looks just completely out of his mind. Like he doesn't even know where he is, what he's doing, what's going on. But I'll tell you what, that Tom Snyder interview is just fantastic. And obviously I was born in '79, so I didn't see it. But going back and like discovering footage like that, like discovering, I bought like a bootleg DVD with like a bunch of interviews on it when I was in high school, I guess, and I found that and it was on there. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And it just keeps going and going, and then he gets out this bear, he starts dressing up this bear with the costume. I'm like, what is going on?
Please put the bear down.
Yeah, you're right.
It is, and even today I'll go back and watch it, and I still laugh out loud every single time I watch it. It is just the most hysterical interview in their entire career. And you're right, it is the one moment that Ace and Peter steal the show, and Gene and Paul just sit there and they can't do anything about it, and just looking at their faces saying, "Hi, Mom," and telling Ace, "Don't do it," and he can't say anyway. They just can't do it. They're just stuck, and they can't do anything about it. It is just fantastic.
All right, when Jay's ready, I think Jay.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess on my list I put Cadillac High, and I guess maybe the reason it's maybe a bigger deal to me than some Kiss fans is because it was close to home. Being from Indiana, we're still geographically fairly close to Cadillac, Michigan. I don't remember it happening in real time, as far as I don't remember hearing anything about the lead up to that moment. But I do remember hearing about it maybe 6 months to a year later, and that was kind of my first experience with it. And then I think I saw some articles in 16 magazine, or one of those monthly magazines back in the day that Kiss was always in. But I just think that moment, it was when you think about it, the Kiss Army had just basically been conceived a few months prior, gaining traction in the Midwest. They'd already had some success in Michigan and Detroit. This particular thing with Cadillac High, I kind of think portrayed the band as a band for the people. They hadn't quite become the larger-than-life, almost godlike entity that they became post-Destroyer. They were still kind of a ragtag, group of 4 obnoxious, scary New Yorkers. And so that moment, they sort of became the protagonist, and I think they endeared themselves more so to the Kiss Army, but also just to the general public, I think. I think that was kind of the first calculated move towards the mainstream. Obviously, I think that all kind of culminated with the success of Beth, but I think that was definitely one of the first early things that Kiss did that really sort of helped them on their ascent to national recognition. So when you toss in the release of Alive, and then you have the Kiss Army starting up in Terre Haute, and then you've got Cadillac High, that's like a trifecta of badassery, all in a very, very short period of time. So that's definitely a top fiver for me, for sure.
So that took place in what, October '75. So Alive has just come out. It's a marketing ploy for a failing band and label, because that label had no money, the band had no money, they had no national exposure yet. Alive hadn't broken. That's a month away. So I mean, that's just an incredible part of history. And my holy grail is a complete recording of that show
Absolutely.
that they did in the gym. I would love, never enough. But that whole thing, Jim Neff and the KISS defense and the formation of the Army, Bill Starkey, it's just such an incredible foundation part of what we're still celebrating today.
Oh yeah,
It's the beginning. I mean, the TV show in '74 is, wow, that's cool. But here is something very organic being done. And what's the story? That they couldn't afford the helicopter ride, so they do it from outside of town, just appearances, and to know how they were struggling and about to basically go bankrupt the label. I mean, insane part of history.
Yep, for sure.
All right.
No, I didn't have it on my top 5 either, but that's one that I guess would be, if I were to do a 6 or 7, it would definitely be on there. I mean, and that footage that's on Kissology is really fantastic considering the age of that. You look at that footage on Kissology, it looks really crisp and really clear for how old it was and how it was even filmed on the fly almost. But that playing in Cadillac is one of those moments that no one's ever duplicated anything even close to that. I don't think. And I drove to Sault Ste. Marie to see a show back in '07, and I was trying to talk my brother and said, "Hey, let's go to Cadillac and just go by the high school just to check things out. How cool would that be?" He's like, "Hey, it's 4 hours out of the way. We are not doing that. You are nuts."
Well, I think they actually have a display. They have a display in the school still. And, I guess the city of Cadillac still talks about that, all these years later. So you wouldn't have been like some creepy touristy kind of guy.
That's what I told him.
You'd be like everybody else
in Cadillac.
Yeah.
People do this all the time, I swear. He goes, "No, we are not doing that."
That one was not on my list, but that would have been huge for me if they came to my high school. It would have been the perfect time. I was in high school during that time period, but I just can't imagine how that must have been for all the kids that were there. Even though KISS wasn't very well known then, they're like, it must have been a kind of a shock of who is this, But aren't they supposed to make a movie of this, right? I thought they were making it.
Yeah, I think Gene is. Yeah, I think Gene is like, we're on top of it. It's already in production, and but you never know with Gene.
It would be nice to see though, something like that.
That would be awesome. Honestly, I think the movie Detroit Rock City would have been so much more interesting had the premise been based on Cadillac High instead of the bogus excuse they came up with to make that movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you talk about schools, there's only really one other school appearance that the band ever did, and that was the 1976 M&M's contest. Yeah, when they played the junior high school for the contest winners, they'd get schools to send in vouchers, and whichever school sent in the most would get a KISS concert in their gym. So Cadillac High and Mount Prospect, Illinois, River Trails Junior High were the two kind of school shows. Friend doesn't really count, because it's not a gimmick promotional type thing. So, really, really cool. Cadillac, I think it's one of the high points on the Kissology is that footage.
Yeah,
just how it's all put together. A couple good websites that people can search out on the web as well. For Neff Zone, Jim Neff used to have a bunch of stuff up on a website that was made a fun read. It was some of the letters that he sent the band. Very cool. All right, let's move on to another one. Who goes next? Lonnie.
All right. This is my number 2, and it's probably on a lot of your guys' list too, but the MTV Unplugged appearance and reuniting the original members for the first time since 1979. And for me, this one was just, it's almost a 1A for me, because it was 1995 and internet really hadn't taken off or anything like that. And I remember watching MTV. I didn't know about it. I mean, I know it happened in August, but I didn't know about it. And I remember watching MTV the week before Halloween saying, oh, Kiss is on MTV Unplugged on Halloween night. And I'm like, I was sitting there watching it with my girlfriend, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Kiss is going to be on, MTV Unplugged. And she's like, really? And I was like, yeah. And because Kiss was, put yourself back in 1995. Kiss was not popular in the fall
Off the radar completely.
Not at all. And she's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, it's going to be great. So Halloween night, it's on. I'm in the basement of my house, and I'm watching the performance. Oh, they're playing Sure Know Something. They're playing Coming Home. They're playing See You Tonight. This is great. And I'm talking to her on the phone, and they're playing Every Time I Look at You. And I just still remember this to this day. And they get done playing Every Time I Look at You, and Paul Stanley goes, we got some members of the family here tonight. And I'm not talking about Mom and Dad. I'm talking about Peter Criss and Ace Frehley. And I freaked out. Because I had no idea it was coming. I'm 15, 16 years old. There's no internet leaking telling me, hey, this is what happened. I had no idea. I'm like, oh my gosh. I screamed like an 11-year-old girl when they came out. Swear to God. It was unbelievable to me that they came out. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. And then they didn't play 2000 Man. When you're watching it on MTV, they didn't play 2000 Man. They went straight into Beth and played that. And I was just in heaven watching it. And to me, that moment that they came out on MTV Unplugged is just it's still one of my top. It's like I said, it's like a 1A to me when the band reunited like that. And I remember when the album came out in March, and I remember walking I got out of school, and I was waiting for a ride to get picked up from school, and that album was coming out, and I had to have it. So I didn't even want to wait till I got home. So I walked to the music store down the street from school and bought it, and then came back to school so that when I got home, I could listen to it right away. I didn't have to waste time of getting home and then going to the music store, because I had to have it immediately. And at that point, by that time, it was March of '96. After that album came out, they already had the Grammy appearance, and you knew what was coming. They still hadn't officially announced the reunion tour, even when that album came out, but you knew it was coming. And that moment that Ace and Peter came out on MTV Unplugged is just, it's still mine. It just blew my mind. It was just amazing.
See, I didn't get to watch that at the time. I was living in Glasgow, and I had to wait until March when the video and CD came out, and it was magic. And that remains one of my all-time favorite Kiss albums, videos, whatever. Mm-hmm. It is perfection. Amazing performances, number one. Great set list or track listing, depending on which. And the magic of Ace and Peter and poor old Bruce. On the bootleg, at least, that's just one of the saddest moments in history. It's such a melancholy moment, because once they were out with Peter and Ace again, by the time I saw this in March '96, we all knew what was coming, and you kind of know that it's the end of the era there, and so it's melancholy, but it's also bloody awesome. So.
Yeah, I agree. It was also on my list as well, and I think I had heard rumors about it. I don't remember how I heard about it, but I think I was expecting something like that to happen. But still, when Ace and Peter walked out on the stage, I was floored, man. I mean, so much so that I will totally admit I cried. Yes, I did. And I was married at the time, and my wife's like, "You are a blooming idiot." She was a Kiss fan too, but yeah, I was a heap of tears by the end. But it was just vindication, especially for me, because my time with Kiss goes back to the original four early on, and so I had spent so many years following the band in that sort of golden era that when the split happened, it was heartbreaking for me. Just Peter leaving alone was bad. was bad enough. And although Eric did an admirable job, it was never the same after that. And then when Ace was gone, it was just a whole different kind of experience. So seeing those guys come out on that stage, in light of the fact that just the year before, there was all kinds of shit talking going on, Peter and Ace saying things about Gene and Paul and vice versa. There was a lot of acrimony between those two camps, between those two factions. So to see them all on stage smiling and, sort of creating KISStory together was a goosebump-inducing minute for sure. Yeah, that'd be in mine. That'd be in my top 5.
And for collectors out there, there are several DVDs of rehearsals for this event that you can be the fly on the wall and watch the band rehearsing for the broadcast. That makes for a very interesting viewing, as does, of course, the uncut version of the performance, which, 6 takes to get Rock and Roll All Night right. I think Paul's the MVP of MTV Unplugged, by the way. Every time I look at you and I Still Love You are 2 of what I think are his greatest vocal performances.
He never sounds better than what he
ever. That is just unbelievable. Mm-hmm. The whole band are on fire. So great part of history. Absolutely.
Going back to that, after they did the MTV Unplugged, Peter and Ace came to St. Louis in December of '95. They're still doing the Bad Boys tour even after that. They still had a few more dates booked on that, and they came. Peter's band came on and they did their set, and Peter's band gets done about 9:00. Okay, we're waiting for Ace's band. 10:00 rolls around. 11:00 rolls around. No Ace really. Ace finally comes on stage like at 11:30, loud, out of his mind. And I look at my brother. I'm like, this reunion tour ain't happening. He's out of his mind. And 6 months later, we saw him on the reunion tour.
Well, at least on the reunion, he was vertical because, of course, he was challenged the whole time. So that's what I guess makes the Live Worldwide thing, the amazing thing in KISStory, that they kept it together, did it. But
yep, that was almost on my list to the Unplugged. I remember watching it when it aired, and I was floored when I saw Ace and Peter come out. So it was very cool, and I remember I made sure I put a VHS tape in beforehand so I could record it, and I watched that over and over, days after that. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So yeah, that was a big moment.
I just lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, 95, 96. So this is a magical period, I guess. The rebirth of the band, the birth of the band on the internet, because I watched reports of all this from Europe. We didn't get to see the broadcasts. Collecting all of those convention acoustic performances was utterly addicting in that period as well, because you just never knew what was going to arrive. You didn't get the set list when you were trading with people back then. It wasn't all documented on the internet. There were 3 sites? I think Roth's Rendezvous, Bill and Ours. I don't remember who the heck that other site was, but there was one other site, Kiss Asylum and Otaku. So there was, and of course my own site, which I started in '95 on AOL. So there wasn't much out there, but there was the news groups. AOL was big. That's where I started collecting all this stuff from the Unplugged era. It's the birth really of modern fandom. All right, let's move on to another pick. I think we've moved around to Ken.
All right. One of you guys, I think, may have had this on your list too, is the solo albums is on my list. That was kind of huge for me. I just getting into the band in '77 and starting to then collect the prior albums and so on. And I was really, really starting to get into it. And then all of a sudden, hey, whoa, 4 Kiss albums on one day? I was like, this is awesome. That even though they didn't sound all like Kiss albums, it was a big moment. No other band in history has released solo albums Well, they have released solo albums, but not on the same day. So, like for instance, the Beatles, right? They've all released solo albums, but not on the same day like that. That was and while continuing to be in the band and stay in the band and have future albums. So, but it was kind of the beginning of the end, though. The writing was starting to be, come on the wall there at that point. So it was huge. The whole thing, it was tied in with kind of, for me, with the TV movie Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. I thought that was the greatest thing when I first saw it, but I watch it now and it's like watching the old Batman series when you were a kid, and you thought it was so serious, and then nowadays it's like, oh, I didn't know they were joking all this time. But anyway, so yeah, that was huge with that, and I remember them big advertising going on with that too. I know they overshipped the albums, platinum plus each one, so they took a loss on that. But I remember going to the store and getting the little, I still have it today, the plastic bag that you put the solo albums in, and they would hand out along with it. So that was kind of a big deal for me, and it was like a ton of music all at once I could just listen to that was Kiss related.
Do you recall which one you listened to first?
Well, yeah, what I listened to first was Gene Simmons, because being my favorite. So it started off, Radioactive, and I thought, okay, this is gonna. And then it took some weird turns, unexpected. But before
what in the hell's going on?
Yeah. But before Kiss, I was listening. Before Kiss, I was listening to, Linda Ronstadt, Neil Sedaka, Carpenter. This is before I switched over to Kiss. I mean, it was a tragic, change from one to the other. So it didn't bother me so much. I thought it was kind of strange that I didn't expect these other songs from Gene Simmons. I liked it when he does the Beatle type music, style. But I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed most of the music on most of the albums. I still enjoy it today.
What about Peter Criss's album? I gotta ask.
Well, Peter Criss, I wasn't a fan of Beth so much. So there was probably about 4 standout songs on that for me. And then the rest is like, it was just, I wanted more, heavier rock. I'm more on the heavier side of Kiss.
Yeah, the solo albums are historic without doubt. Casablanca, it took the balls of someone like Neil Bogart to even think about that. He was warned off printing more than, I think, 850,000 copies of each. He's like, no, I'm going to go, 1.2 million of each. So I think they printed, 5 million of them, and then had 2 million returns. And then they started, I think it affected the industry on, number one, how your album shipments were counted for gold and platinum certifications by the RIAA was affected, and also Polygram, which had bought into Casablanca at the time, wouldn't let them press as many copies. So I mean, he would ship anything. Read Larry Harris's book. I mean, that's got a lot of the minutia, and also C.K. Lentz, Kiss and Sell, both go well into how the solo albums destroyed Casablanca Records, but I don't think they're totally to blame. Totally historic. Very cool. All right, I'm going to pick one. I've only got one left because we've picked everything else off my list. My number 4 pick is Kiss Alive, and we kind of already touched on it with talking about Cadillac. But it is the one album, if I was only allowed to have one Kiss album, it would be Alive. It's the best of the first 3 studio albums. It's the band absolutely on fire. Regardless of how much may have been done in the studio. I don't think that's pertinent. But it's the starting point for the band's success. Obviously, it's the album that broke first. It's the perfect tour, the near perfect tour. That set list, 16 songs, I think, just pure, concise, unfiltered, purely distilled Kiss on one album. So, Kiss Alive, without it, obviously, there wouldn't have been Destroyer. Or there wouldn't be Casablanca Records. So its importance both to the label, to the band, it kept them on Casablanca. It allowed the label time and money it allowed the band to get some money finally as well. So it's not only from the historic point, but just the artistic point. It's perfection. So that's my final pick.
I agree.
Said it all, man.
No, you can't deny that.
Yeah, there was nothing on there. That's the standard for all live albums, that came after it. So that one, even though, yes, there may have been some other recordings going on to touch things up, it's still the raw. Because I wish they would release the original without the changes, the original recordings. That would be a nice 40th anniversary of that album, which is what I believe this year, and they're going to do it on the cruise, from what I hear. So,
yeah, that would actually make a great box set. Your primary recordings from Kiss Alive on their own, standalone. Metallica's released its concerts for a long time. Pearl Jam did the same. How about a Kiss box set with all of those master, untouched, board recordings? What was it? The Mark of the Quad. Obviously Detroit, Wildwood, and I always forget the Davenport, Iowa. So all of those shows, I think they would make a fantastic box set. That geeks would eat up, and the 4,000 copies it would sell, we'd really enjoy. So,
yeah,
and that's why they're not doing it.
Well, if they're willing to do KISStoria, if they're willing to do these K40 albums, well, why not a vinyl box set? Each one of those would be a double LP. If they're going to do small print runs these days at $50 for a double LP, I don't see any reason why it can't be done, because you're not going to do any touch-up work on those recordings other than making them into records, which isn't a horrendously complex process. So I don't think there's any economic reason to say, well, it's only going to sell 2,000 copies. Well, the KISStoria box set only sold at most, 1,000 that they made of those. So
I think so, yeah.
I don't think any of those excuses in the modern market actually hold any water whatsoever. So it's all down to their imagination, or lack thereof.
Yep.
All right, any other picks for the top fives that we haven't covered?
Yeah, I've got the Paul Lynde special, which I think is a pretty significant moment in KISStory. Although you had In Concert and you had the Merv Griffin, or not Merv Griffin, well, who was it?
Mike Douglas.
Mike Douglas. God, I can't believe I forgot who it was. Mike Douglas was a daytime show, so you had a limited audience there. In Concert was more of a niche thing because it was a Friday night series once a month, so it wasn't like in regular weekly rotation. So it was more of a niche audience. Paul Lynde was the first time Kiss really was in prime time television aimed at what ended up becoming their prime demographic, the young teenagers and even younger. And I actually missed the Paul Lynde special. I didn't even know a thing about it until it had already come and gone, and I was just devastated that I missed it. And but now that I've seen it 1,000 times over the years, I can look back on that and see how significant it was. I mean, if you factor in the fact that the Beth single had just dropped in August of '76, Hard Luck Woman came in November, and then you've got Paul Lynde right there in between, which I think that may have maybe helped propel Beth a little bit, and certainly maybe helped propel Hard Luck Woman. And I think those three things all together, sort of in orchestration with one another, played a big part in sort of helping Kiss to become the household name, the Gallup poll winner, blah, 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 that they ended up becoming the following year. So, I don't know. I think it's a pretty significant moment in KISStory. And it's certainly one of the more surreal moments in KISStory, for sure.
Yeah, and a really... Detroit Rock City, Beth, and King of the Nighttime World. For some reason, I can't guess. Love them and leave them out of my head. But what an awesome appearance that is as well. I mean, fully, skits, them participating in a show, who was it? The Wicked Witch of the West was on that. Margaret Hamilton.
Yeah.
Major national exposure again. Midnight Special the previous year was what? Did it take place at midnight? It was a late night music show. So,
yeah, it was Saturday nights. Yeah.
So,
Saturday
like
nights.
you say, it is mainstream that the kids are watching. And how many musicians of the modern era have cited the Paul Lynde Halloween special as being their Beatles 64 experience for the next generation? How cool is that?
Yeah, I definitely, I know a lot of people myself who will say that Paul Lynde was sort of their introduction to the band. So that's pretty awesome. And I mean, when I look at the video now, the backdrop where they're actually performing, this kind of mansion looking thing with these awesome like torches, and just the beauty of the footage itself is pretty astounding. It's really too bad that the Destroyer stage wasn't fashioned more like that than what it ended up becoming, which it was an ambitious idea to begin with. But I thought the backdrop for the Paul Lynde special, just that footage, is just some of the most astounding visual footage of the band I've ever seen. It's pretty awesome, man. Pretty awesome.
So I wonder if Gene had any fun with Marie Osmond, Betty White, or Florence Henderson, who were all on that, or Pink Tuscadero.
Good chance.
Or at least he tried.
All right. Other ones. That was actually on my list, and I'd completely skipped over it.
That's a good one. As far as being on in primetime television, target audience being hit. Mine isn't I have one that's not a television appearance, but it's a big moment for the band that kind of said that they're bigger than just a band, and that is when they poured their own blood into the Marvel comic red ink. And yeah, we've all seen the news report of them doing that, but in that moment, put yourself in the band's shoes at that moment that you're doing that. You're pouring your blood into the comic book that your band is putting out in 1977. You are more than that. At that point, Kiss became more than just a band. I mean, and Gene said it a million times. You don't see the Eagles having their own comic book, but not only are you in this band that's becoming more and more popular, but you're releasing your own comic book. You're pouring your own blood into the red ink. I mean, you are more than just a band at that point. And what came after that? Obviously, more merchandising, the dolls, the trash cans, the record players, everything else that came after that. But at that moment, Kiss became more than just a band. And considering what Kiss is today, I think that moment of them pouring their blood into the red ink really is a signature moment in the band's history, that they are more than just songs on the albums.
But for some, it's also kind of illustrative of when they became a cartoon themselves.
And that's true also, but that moment, I think it's very big in the band's history.
Yeah, very cool moment. And what's the story on that they didn't actually use the ink in the cartoon?
That
it got used in a swimsuit issue of Sports Illustrated or something.
Well, you can't forget Kiss removing their makeup on MTV too, which I think is another really viable big KISStory moment. I remember how much I was pissed that they were even doing it to begin with, because I was totally pro makeup. I thought it was the absolute worst thing they could do. But looking back, it was huge. I mean, nobody gave a rat's ass about Kiss until word leaked that they were going to take their makeup off on TV. And then people that didn't care about Kiss watched just out of curiosity. It was a brilliant marketing move. And, that gained them huge traction with a whole different audience. And the fact that they used it just prior to it was kind of a tie-in to the Lick It Up video. It was just very well orchestrated, even though, sort of the KISS organization, as it had been for so long, was kind of breaking apart at that point. That's maybe the last real brilliant marketing ploy the band ever did.
Well, it was the last card they had to play, wasn't it? Really, they had nothing left.
Oh yeah.
And I don't want to seem too revisionist on that, but it didn't really work. If you look at it, the tour numbers for Lick It Up versus Creatures are negligible. The difference. The album sales, Lick It Up didn't go gold for years, or platinum. So it didn't really boost the sales. I think it took until the early 90s to hit platinum. So it didn't really result in massive sales. It didn't result in a successful tour. And they'd played their last card. So, and then we get back to, of course, Vinny didn't save Kiss. So.
But it got him on MTV, and that was very big for
Yes.
Paul at the time. That was their way to get on MTV, was to take the makeup off. That got the attention, like Jay was saying.
Yeah.
Taking the makeup off. Oh, well, everybody cares. This is interesting. But you're right, Julian. It did not spark the album sales. It did not spark the tour attendance. You look in like some of those reference books, like Kiss Alive Forever. Like, I was really surprised, shocked when I looked at that. It's like, wow, I thought concert sales boosted, because that's what we're spoon-fed, is that, taking the makeup off, that rejuvenated the band, because that's what we're told over and over and over again. But you look at the attendance figures, that's not that is not necessarily the case. That is not the case. But in Gene and Paul's eyes, that was taking the makeup off got them on MTV, and that was very important to Gene and Paul at the time, was getting on MTV.
Yeah, because I had never, I think I saw the I Love It Loud video once on television, and it was not on MTV. In fact, I remember hearing about the video before they'd even taken the makeup off, so they were still touring behind the Creatures album. I remember hearing some of my friends say that they had seen it on some random show, and it was this elusive thing that I ended up not actually seeing until, 4 or 5 years later. I mean, I didn't. It may have been the Kiss Exposed video was the very first time I actually saw that video. So, even though it may not have resulted in, rejuvenating the band on a financial level or even popularity level, it certainly ushered them into a new era on MTV and having that support, which they may not have had, had they continued doing the makeup thing. So,
absolutely. That moment, them taking off the makeup, that's huge.
Yeah, that was almost on my list. I remember watching it, and I thought, it was kind of different seeing them without the makeup. But I know I went to the Lick It Up show shortly after that, or early in the next year, and they actually had to downgrade the venue because of lack of ticket sales from one to another. I think it was at the Berkeley Community Theater where I saw them. So, I knew something was. It didn't help at that point, but I think not until maybe a couple of years later, maybe after Animal Eyes, when they started picking up more fans again with like Heaven's on Fire and some other songs. So it took a while. I think, like Paul said, they thought they couldn't play their instruments, or people thought they couldn't play their instruments without the makeup. That was everything for them, but it wasn't. Of course, they could play their instruments.
Maybe, if anything else, it was, a success for the band, that they proved that they could be a band without the makeup and continued on. Because certainly Animalize was more of a success. It hit nearly 2 million in sales. The concerts increased slightly with each, tour. I think not much more than 5% steps. I don't have Kiss Alive Forever next to me, God help me, to check it. But, Animalize is a little bit better. I think Asylum stagnated a little bit, and Crazy Nights slightly better again. So it certainly is a foundation for the everything else that culminates in Hot in the Shade in the 80s. So, if it made Paul Stanley and Gene say, okay, we can do this, continue on, even when they can order pizzas for the audiences at shows, more power to the event.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's funny though, but if you listen to Gene and Paul, it's funny because they'll tell you, when we took the makeup off, it was like, bam, we're popular again. But that really wasn't the case when you look at the statistics. But they always tell you that, when we took the makeup off, it was
I mean, when you look through the newspapers,
Yeah,
it got a lot of coverage. You
yeah.
go through newspaper archives, it is all over the place. 83, you're only going to read about them taking off the makeup, Race getting arrested. So there wasn't that much coverage for the band in the press, and it worked for getting awareness. Whether the awareness resulted in anyone buying the album or going to the show, it at least put them back in magazines. It put them back in the press. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I went and saw, I went to the Lick It Up tour. I actually saw the Creatures tour with the Plasmatics at Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, and it was kind of a scant audience. There wasn't a whole lot of people there. I was really shocked. And then I went the following year to see the Lick It Up tour in '84, and the place looked packed. But your perception's different when you're there. It's easy now to look back at the numbers and see the true representation of how that tour went. But if you're sitting in the seats watching that show, I had no idea that those tours were floundering on the level that they were. So there was certainly a perception that KISS were doing better than they actually were, and I guess that's really perception is reality.
Yeah, and that always is the danger of revisionist history. Looking back. Our perceptions in the audience. I mean, you're there in '84. Did you have a good time?
I had a blast.
Yeah, that's the same thing as like the arguments in recent years of, people going on about Paul's voice. It's like, well, when you're in the audience, did you have a good time? And nearly always the answer is heck yeah. So that's ultimately what matters, I guess.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Any last ones, Lonnie?
I think you guys got on mine. I had Tiger Stadium, MTV, solo albums, The Unmasking, which Jay just said, and the Blood in the Marvel Comics. We touched on all five of them.
I have one quick one, and it's the big one for me is just Gene and Paul having the foresight to end or leave Wicked Lester to form KISS, and to me that's the biggest thing. They had a vision. It wasn't fully realized yet, but they knew Wicked Lester wasn't it. So they went out, and started recruiting the proper, or the people that would fit that vision, right? Or they had the same vision as them. So that's the biggest thing for me. I wouldn't be able to enjoy 40 plus years of KISS, the highs, the lows, It was all good to me. I mean, it's been quite a trip, roller coaster, as maybe Paul would say, for the 40 years. So that's the biggest thing is, if they didn't do that, we may not be sitting here talking about it.
Yeah, I guess as an artist, that must have taken a heck of a lot of guts to walk away from a record deal
with Epic.
To have the foresight to say, "Hey, this isn't what we want to do," especially when you're offered a record deal and say, "No, we're walking away from this." That, as far as moments go, yeah, I mean that's a huge moment because, like you said, there wouldn't be obviously there wouldn't be a KISS. We wouldn't be sitting here talking if they would have said, "Yeah, let's go ahead with this Wicked Lester album. I think this is the goods." I mean, that's a huge moment saying no.
And just think of what they'd done to get that record deal. Gene had fired a childhood friend from the band.
Yeah,
and they walk away from that record deal. That kind of gives it scope and scale. I mean, that's intense. We will do anything to make it.
Yeah.
So that's a great pick. I wouldn't have thought of going back to '72, but that's the seed.
Yeah.
Now, if they just released the whole Wicked Lester album officially, that would be cool.
Amen.
All right. Anyone got any last thoughts on this one before we wrap up? And which one of these would you say is the biggest? I say Tiger.
Tiger Stadium.
Yeah, Reunion.
Yeah, I mean, personally, definitely Tiger Stadium for sure. I mean, yeah, that was kind of a coming home, a return to the beginning, sort of. So it's really too bad it didn't end then. As much as I love KISS, it would have been more poetic when they did the farewell tour for that to be it. Now I've enjoyed these years since, but what a perfect way to end the story where it begins.
No. I didn't get to see them until Dodger Stadium. Nope. So my first show was Dodger Stadium, so that's I'm glad they didn't end and make the reunion a farewell tour. So that would have ruined my day. More so than all the other concerts I missed throughout my life. So, all right, let's wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone. Ken, Lonnie, Jay, for joining again today.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. We will catch you next time.